Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Yeah.
What's your question?
Okay. So the question, this was on Bomba Talks group, and the person has said, we have recently adopted our Streety after he was diagnosed with TBT. He is now cured. However, we are facing some issues with his behavior. He's become extremely protective of the house and doesn't like it if even the maid comes home. He snapped at her once and she's now scared of him.
Mm.
He's now put in a crate when she comes home where he whines the entire time. He also developed separation anxiety and whines, howls, and cries if left alone. It's getting so much worse each day that he's now crying even if one member goes out of the house. He destroys furniture, scratches doors, climbs up on tables he's not supposed to. His crying stresses my other dog, who then joins in. We're also having a problem with dominance issues where my other guy, who's been with us since he was a puppy, dominates the new boy, who, despite being aggressive, tolerates him, though we don't know when he might snap at him too. He's not shown any aggression towards family members, including my younger daughter.
Okay. So there's a lot going on here. And I think one of the first things to remember is behavior is not separate from, and I think this person who's put up the question recognizes this too, right? Which is that the health and behavior are very, very closely related. And so I think we need to look at that. And this is something that we talk about a lot at BHARCS as well, which is there is this the stress hormones in the body start accumulating, and when they kind of cross a certain threshold, the dogs also become oversensitive to various triggers, and then they cross the kind of second threshold where it starts kind of showing as behavioral issues, and behavioral issues in quotes because it's really sort of rooted in physiology as well. So what happens with dogs that go through a medical situation like this is medical situations by themselves are huge stressors. I mean, first of all, there is the pain and the discomfort and all that. That's part of the medical issue itself, but also the treatment procedure, the stress the family has around it, being pinned down, administered this, that, and the other, and the oxidative stress of the medicines as well. So there is so much going on. And so that first threshold gets crossed very quickly, and they become kind of hyper aroused and hypersensitive to just general triggers that were not triggers in the past, that they could walk past and, oh, okay, big deal. Now suddenly they're oversensitive. And so what happens is once they become oversensitive, each of these then hugely adds on very quickly. And so that's the threshold, right? Once they cross the threshold, it's very quickly adding on. Each trigger, which should be something that they just look at and brush off and go away, is now adding on in terms of these stress hormones. And the second threshold gets kind of, they go past that. Not only do they go past that quickly and you start seeing behavioral issues of many kinds, but they repeatedly now start going past that. So they're kind of already in that state. So they're kind of repeatedly going past that very quickly. And what also happens is the brain then becomes sensitive to a lot of these things and starts getting wired. So anxiety issues, fear issues, and things like that start creeping in, because they are, at the end of the day, these hormones are neurotransmitters as well. So there is things going on in the brain, new neural pathways that are getting, when somebody once told me, we remember life often in catastrophes. One of the things that we know, from Dr. Sapolsky's book is when your stress hormones are riding high, the terrible things that happen to you are just, you remember those, whereas all the non-terrible things are just a blur. They just go away. We know this, right? If we've been through something traumatic, we know that, the things that we end up remembering are the worst things. And that's the same thing that's happening. And we spoke about this in the last AMA as well. Then there is a kind of a building up of these negative emotions. And so it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And again, that's called out by this person who's put the post as well, right? It is getting worse. And you can see that, anxiety issues, one after the other, are creeping in. It's not, and what they're, so first up, Confinement is a very bad idea, because when you're feeling anxious, and I've done a full interview on confinement and crates, and I'm going to try and share that on Bobart Dogs as well. Confinement we have several studies that show that confinement itself is a stressor. So for a dog that's already struggling with stress, overload of stress, adding that in, I mean, you didn't even have to read the rest of the line out. I knew that the answer would be that they can't take it. And it is going to get worse and worse, and they can start kind of trying to chew themselves through it, damage their teeth, and that further adds to stress, and it's just a spiral. And then so that's one thing. And then the second thing that's being seen as well is it's not really dominance that the other dog is showing, but this kind of anxiety that one dog is experiencing now starts kind of stressing the other dog out as well. It is contagious, and this happens in humans too, right? If one person is constantly agitated, how often is it possible that we're going to be able to isolate ourselves from that? We also start getting agitated. In fact, if our dogs are getting agitated, we get agitated. And so we kind of are very on the edge, and we can snap very easily. We're not trying to be dominant or anything. We're snapping. Because kind of our nerves are frayed, and that can look very different in dogs versus what we would probably do. And often it gets mislabeled, and it's a very dangerous label to start working with, because we'll end up going down the wrong path. So, of course, this dog definitely needs professional help, but professional help, what I would say is one that can start creating safe spaces for the dog, safe connections, secure attachments for the dog, starting to reduce the stressors. And there are only some known ways that we can reduce stressors. We talk about it a lot in our classes as well. Sniffing activities, chewing activities, any kind of thinking, puzzle solving and things like that, which this dog may not be ready for yet. So it may be a little bit more of sniffing and chewing. You can work with diet a little bit to increase sleep tremendously. Sleep is extremely effective in draining those stress hormones out. And some kind of balance activities can also help. I know that, that kind of sensory integration can work as well. So if I were a professional working with this dog, or if you were working with this dog, I would recommend start with some of these light activities, calming activities, not the heavy duty stuff, because this dog seems to be quite agitated. And then work on a lot of reassurance, especially with, again, it's not necessarily resource guarding the house. I think dogs most dogs kind of get a little excited with anybody entering their space, but a dog that has kind of crossed this threshold can start experiencing it as anxiety. So giving the dog reassurance that don't worry, whoever is coming home is not going to hurt you. So instead of putting the dog in a crate, the dog may appreciate a little better if you took the dog to another room and stayed with the dog in that room. So it's reassurance again. It's not isolation. It's not punishment. Crating is so difficult because not only are you afraid, you can now see what you're afraid of, and there's nowhere for you to go. Whereas if you're in another room with the person that you feel safe with, who's saying, look, I do this with Chiru all the time, my dog. If she's getting anxious, I mean, there's construction going on here. So there's all kinds of people who come here and do all kinds of things, right? So much noise. So I take her into the house and I will sit with her. And if I can't sit with her, I'll have somebody that she trusts. You remember when I was moving and there were movers all over the house and she's getting nervous, and I got somebody to sit with her in another room. She was still agitated, but at least, she was feeling safe, and she somehow managed to cope for a few hours. Slowly, gradually, they kind of start calming down in that situation. So some kind of a management of that kind. And of course, the hand signals that we talk about in terms of calming the dog down, this is something that they'll have to come to a BHARCS professional to learn those. But those could also be very, very useful. Doing that for a little while, just getting the dog back, that dog that has crossed the threshold. It's not a full lifestyle, it's not for the rest of the dog's life. Just like a detox period, right? Get the dog back past this threshold where they're able to emotionally regulate on their own, and then sort of introducing some healthy habits after that can definitely help. And learning new habits, those new pathways, new neural pathways that have to be built. How does that sound? Anything you have to add, Saujanya?
Yeah, I was just thinking because she mentions that they have just brought the dog home, like an ex-treaty into home. So I'm guessing a lot of like new environment, like sudden loss of old home to, a new environment, new house. And you mentioned about secure attachment, and I feel like that is so critical at this point, I'm guessing, because, new place, new people, new environment, new dog already existing in this place who's also facing a lot of like anxiety because this dog has come into the house, like the entire dynamic change in the house and everything. So I think building a lot on that attachment, like reassurance, attachment, connection, I think is so critical. And the other thing that you mentioned is about health. So if the dog has recently undergone like a major health, issue, I think this is something that it's a very traumatic experience, right? Like in terms of when we go to the doctors itself, it can get traumatic. But like here, our dogs don't even know like why they're going through whatever they are. So I think this is kind of a traumatic experience that the dog has to get, like process and, either deal with it and, come out of it or know how to cope with it so that they can keep it behind now that it's done. And while also building this new relationship in this new house, in this new environment, I think that's the major work. And I'm guessing she mentions mainly about the maid. And I've seen this a lot with Zoe, my younger dog, where, we do see like house helps, the domestic workers doing work with a lot of like equipment and, like, and a dog who's had health issue recently probably is also very wary of these things. And I think that's just like, as you said, it's just building up and it's crossed a threshold where they can even process that, okay, I'm scared of this, but I think I can process this is something that's just not happening, I'm guessing. So I think a lot of like just that decompression, detox, like you spoke about, and then building that relationship, I think is the most critical like step, I think now.
Yeah, I think these guys might benefit from kind of researching a bit on secure attachments, because I think this is an area that we are only beginning to understand with human beings now. So I think there's a lot of new literature now on it. And then sort of and when they research, they'll come across literature to do with human beings, and you kind of have to extend that. All social mammals experience similar things. In fact, a lot of the studies done on secure attachments are on social mammals, not on humans. So the learning goes both ways. And like you said, if this is a dog that's actually just been brought in, then oh my goodness, that is a lot to deal with at one shot. So even without that, I think this would have been difficult, but add that in, and that's a huge lifestyle change. So the dog needs a lot of time and space, lots of reassurance. Yeah. Okay, so you want to add something?
No, I was just thinking about gentle parenting, like, it's all completely based on building secure attachment, right? Like, again, research it and then see, whatever you have to extend, if at all, to dogs. And, and I think, as you said, it mostly holds true for our dogs, so where you see in social mammals, I think it holds true for dogs as well. So I think extend those concepts and see how we can facilitate for the dog.
Yeah. It would be interesting to see if social non-mammals are also these things apply. But anyway, that's a topic for another day. I really hope they get the help that they need. And we've run out of time. So some of the other questions, maybe we can take it in the next AMA session. But I think if they want to work with professional help, then yeah. Saujanya, you can always offer, or they can come to class, the BHARCS Canine Essential 101, which also gives them the foundation that they need to work with this. I really hope the dog gets help. Thank you so much for bringing this up. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to the dog parent for giving us permission to discuss this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And I think we posted back on the PD
yeah,
group page.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Let's do that.
yeah.
Oh,